Hi, Shravan.
Hi, good
Uh,
morning.
Good morning. So you don't have any network problem, no? No issue, I
I
think.
think I shouldn't have. Anyway, I am connecting it from home. I have good Wi-Fi. Let us hope it is good.
During
Yeah.
introduction, you can keep your video on. Otherwise, you will play
Yeah,
video because the back.
yeah, yeah. I just wanted to say hi to everyone. Otherwise, I'll
Okay.
keep my video video
Today, Dr.
off to
Mukul Shukla has also joined. We want to.
Hi, Mukulji. How are you?
Sir, I just unmuted.
Hi.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Good morning. Wonderful seeing you all. All the
Thank you.
best.
Yeah, great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Right. Uh, Fine. We have Dr. Mukul Shukla. He is a professor at MNIT Allahabad. He has also joined today. So let us all welcome him for this session also. He will be like a participant as I am doing today. So let me introduce about the speaker, today's speaker. So Dr. G. Sarvar Kumar will be talking about the topology optimization and something related to CAD also. Uh, he is the speaker for the last 4 years, and he will be fourth time he will be talking. But today, this time, he will be talking something different to the participants. So Dr. G. Sarvan Kumar has done his BTech from University of Madras and MTech from NIT Trichy, further PhD from IIT Kanpur. So he has a large research group at IIT Madras. Prior joining to IIT Madras, he was working at IIT Guwahati, and Professor G. Sarvan Kumar, currently, he is a professor at the Department of Engineering Design, IIT Madras. He has guided 7 PhD students, I think, seven only, I guess. So, and there are three
Yeah.
PhDs are in process, and he is a big, in the sense that he's a good big consultant for many of the industries in and around Chennai. He has done large number of consultancy work for the in the area of CAD optimization and the design also. And recently he was awarded an imprint project. And as I told you in the introduction starting session, he is also one of our project investigators in our metal additive manufacturing using laser cladding. And he has about 100 plus publications, and his lab is a big lab at IIT Madras. So he has about three patents granted and many number which are being submitted. And he has written four textbooks also, and he has delivered at various national and international level seminars. And Government of India, TIFAC also, he has recently delivered a talk at Delhi. And with these few words, I request Dr. G. Sarvan Kumar to share his thoughts about the topology optimization with MATLAB. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor TVK Gupta. Nice, you have introduced me. Thanks. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this workshop. And very good morning to all the participants. Generally, this session in the previous editions, I used to give along with hands-on, working with MATLAB. And because of the current pandemic situation, I was not sure whether everyone will be able to connect with MATLAB and we can do an online session. So what I have done is I have removed certain aspects of the talk, and and given the limited time as well, I thought I would do justice to primarily optimization. So that is what generally I will take optimization, and then I will also talk about topology optimization. This time I am thinking of doing mostly on optimization, but let's say if we have time, we can also touch upon some topology optimization. So with these few words, let me open my presentation, and just give me a minute. Kindly, TVK, can you please let me know whether my screen is visible?
Yeah, screen is visible. You can make it full screen also.
Yeah. No, I'm working with my Mac. Somehow it
Okay.
has some slideshow issue is there with
But it
PowerPoint.
is
Okay.
visible. It is clearly visible.
Yeah. I'm just trying to make it as big as possible. Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully the
Yes, yes.
content is visible, right?
It is
Yeah.
visible. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So,
Just
okay.
1 second. Participants, please mute. Anywhere I have muted everyone. Please don't talk in the mid of the session. Any queries we will entertain at the end of the session. Thank you.
TVK, you can also moderate in between, if there is a chat box feature and they ask a question, you can maybe intervene me
That
or
time I will do it. Yes, yes. No
yeah.
worries. Yeah.
So
Okay.
people can put up questions in the chat box. I think
That-
I would welcome that. We can even talk, as we discuss. Okay. Yeah.
Fine. Okay. Okay.
Um,
Fine.
so today's talk, as I mentioned, I would primarily focus on optimization and the MATLAB toolbox that we have for doing optimization. So this, I actually take a postgraduate full course on optimization, and each of these methods, the theory and the concepts are described more in detail. So today we will kind of go through them in a very fast manner, and I believe more resources are available to help you, further grasp all these concepts. So as we see nature, God has created this in a very optimal fashion. Everything that we see around this world is uh, mostly optimized, and it's a well evolved ecosystem. So man has always been trying to mimic at least this aspect, and whatever he has been creating, he has been trying to do it in the best possible way. So when we say best possible way, it could be from the aspect of the resources that we are using, and also from what the intended function, so how good that the product or whatever we are trying to create is able to meet its objectives or the functions. In a perspective, we say we would like to say minimize the cost or maximize the performance. The performance could be very many aspects depending upon the product itself. And we have several objectives typically in a design. So the constraints are essentially a means of accomplishing a multi-objective design problem. If we always see, all the design problems are all problems, whether it is process optimization, or it is a multi-objective problem. And since traditionally we weren't very good in solving multi-objective problems, we tend to write it in a way that we can solve, and that is how we started formulating our objectives as single objective problems, and we moved several of the lower ranked objectives as constraints. So I may say, okay, maximize the performance subject to a constraint that the cost should be less than some value. I may have several such constraints. But if I am able to solve the problem as maximize the objective one, or say the performance, as well as at the same time try to minimize the objective two, which is the cost, then that is the best scenario, because in that case I'm going to get what we call as a plethora of optimal solutions, what we call as the Pareto front in a multi-objective optimization problem. And each of the objective is satisfied given a particular value for, say, the other objectives. In the sense, in a weighted fashion, each objective can be accomplished, and you get several set of solutions, and depending upon the priority that I would like to accord to the various objectives, I may choose the solution. So post fact doing optimization, I can choose the solution rather than upfront fixing which objective is more critical to me or what is more important to me. So these are the ways of looking at formulating the objective or formulating the problem, the optimization problem that we are having. And as you will all understand, formulating the problem is a very important step, and almost you are midway if you have nicely formulated your problem. So whenever we talk about optimization, it's not only about tools, but it's about how we formulate the problem or how we look at the problem. So more recent advances and techniques available like multi-objective optimization techniques and all these evolutionary methods like genetic algorithms and so forth, it is possible that we can solve a real world problem with multiple objectives rather than posing it as a single objective problem. But though the genesis and understanding and mathematics is from the single objective problem, we will first look at that and see some methods or tools that are available in MATLAB that can solve single objective optimization problems with and without constraints, and then move on to understand the multi-objective problem. And today, optimization is there everywhere, and whatever activity you are into. Okay, so just a quick framework. So generally, our engineering design problem, if we take, we have a set of processes like we do a customer or need analysis, then we put up a initial design hypothesis, or we say that this is a concept, and then we start more detailed analysis from the perspective of embodiment, how we can embody this concept, and when it comes to parts, sizing and optimizing their performance and so forth. And finally, it is a very iterative process, and then you kind of stop, either because you have achieved your objective or you have exhausted your resources to achieve the optimum. So all optimization problem need not find the optimal solution. So given a time, let's say time constraint or the resource constraint, whatever is the best solution that I can get, that is also treated as an suboptimal solution, because that is how the industry works. Industry never works to find what is called as the global optima and so forth. For academicians like us, it may be good. We can solve and we can find it, but industry doesn't works like that. Industry works with incremental improvements and finding at least what I may call it as local optima. So I have a solution, I may want to move to a solution which is a local optima in the current context. So when the context changes or my constraints changes, then I do again an optimization. So when I say context changes, like time moves on, people's expectation changes, so we have to modify the design, or the performance requirements on the design changes, and thereby I again do revisit this problem, and I again find a solution. So there are different ways of formulating the optimization problem in this context. So one way of looking at it is that I have a current solution, and around the current solution I can fix up a design exploration space in which I can try to explore a better solution rather than trying to find the best solution that may be possible. The other way of formulating the problem is that I am okay with, let's say, certain objectives. Only on certain objectives I am not okay. In the sense, let's say I am okay with the performance, but is it possible that I can reduce the cost? So that formulation will be different, in the sense, now I would like to move my constraint boundary and see how my solution moves. So typically in a constrained problem, you will know that the solution will lie on a constrained surface. Otherwise, there is no physical meaning of a constraint. When I put a constraint like cost, then obviously the optimal solution will come down and lie at that cost boundary condition. Because let's say if I put a constraint that the cost has to be less than some X rupees, your optimal solution will go and it will lie on the cost boundary where the cost becomes X rupees, right? Or if I put the performance constraint, my solution will typically be there. So out of the several constraints that I have in a design, at least few of them will be active constraints at the solution boundary. And one way of formulating the optimal design problem is what happens when my design, these constraints are moving. So that means today, I have designed the product for X rupees. I want the product to be at X minus Y rupees, or I want, the performance to be X plus, some incremental. So there are different ways of formulating this optimization problem, and there are specific tools or ways of working with these problems. So the first problem where I said current solution is there, I can put up a design exploration space, one hypercube. If you look at the design space, I have several things that I can change, and that gives me a space to explore, the design space to explore, and we can explore it. How do we do this exploration in practical scenarios? In practical scenarios, several times I may have to do some experiments and know how the performance or the cost varies at these different points, and that is where the design of experiments, optimal way of exploring the design space comes into picture. And the surrogate or the response surface modeling, sensitivity analysis, all that helps us before we can come to actually using an optimization tool. Okay, so these are some of the concepts that we have to keep in mind when we talk about optimization, and when we try to say that from a problem domain I am coming to the stage where I can compute, or I can start working with an optimization algorithm. Okay, from a structural perspective, because I'm a mechanical engineer, I'm just taking this as an example. There are several ways of looking at this problem, and traditionally we have been doing what is called as a size optimization, where we had a preconceived notion of the shape, what kind of a shape I should have, and then I just did a size optimization. In the sense, I knew that I have to develop a truss structure, and all I have to do is worry about the cross section. Let's say I take an I cross, I section. So I have already decided that I will use this particular shape and this kind of a topology of these connection of the members, and what I am left with is simply to decide what should be the cross section, the dimension. So that is the kind of problems that we were traditionally solving. But now with tools like the topology optimization, it is possible to explore this design space in a better way, in the sense I can do a shape optimization wherein I prefix the topology. I don't change the topology, but I change the shape. When I say topology, we talk about in a CAD sense or from a geometry sense. The topology basically gives you the connectedness, how things are connected. So in the second row of picture, if you see how the material is connected is not changing. Because why? Because the entire connected component is remaining one, and the number of holes or genus is remaining the same. So in a geometric sense, we talk this as the shells and the number of genuses. So the number of shell is the same and the number of genus is remaining the same, but the shape of that shell or the shape of the genus is changing, and that is the shape optimization. So we can do that. And if I would like to further increase this design space to explore, I can say that let me not prefix my topology and let me evolve the topology. In the sense, what should be that shell and how many genuses or holes should be there, that can also be evolved in the process. So we have moved from size optimization all the way to topology optimization, and today we have several end use cases where the topology optimization has resulted in nice designs, more biological, more and that is also due to the fact that now we have more advanced manufacturing techniques than what we had earlier, and we have techniques like additive manufacturing which can create a plethora of complicated shapes, and thereby we can find new optimas or new spaces, design spaces that were not explored earlier. Those could be explored. Okay. So coming back to the what I would say, the blackboard of optimization. So this is the way we have always been looking at it, and we are aware of this kind of the function and its minima right from our say the higher secondary schooling or first year understanding of the function minima. So when we talk about optimization, we are actually trying to search for the minima. And as you can see, there are several minimas, and there are, mathematically, each of these points is representing a solution that can be obtained when you start from different points. Or when I try to move in this landscape or this function, I may end up in achieving any of these things, because mathematically, what am I looking at when I say I am looking at the minima? We are essentially looking for a stationary point, and which is also satisfying some additional condition. So we call this as the necessary and sufficiency condition in an optimization. The necessary condition is that it has to be a stationary point. When we say stationary point, that means if I roll a ball in this landscape, it has to come and stand somewhere. When I do it with incremental movement, it has to come and stop at some point. Or if I would state it more plainly, for a given function, the gradient has to vanish. So you will see that in all these points that you are seeing in this slide, the gradient has vanished. But all these points are not truly in the sense the optimal point or the minima, because if I perturb, let's say, the second point, I hope you are able to see my mouse. So the second point, then you will see that this point, though it is stationary momentarily here, it can roll down to some other place if I do a disturbance. So these are called as this point is called as the point of inflection. And how do I understand whether it is a point of inflection or it is a point something like this, where even if I disturb this point, it's going to come back and settle at the same point? This I can understand from what we call as the sufficiency condition. And mathematically speaking, basically we are looking at higher order derivatives. Okay, the first order derivative, the vanishing of that gives us the stationary point, and higher order derivatives will give us an understanding whether it is a minima or it's a maxima or it's an inflection point. Okay, and so that's why we work with in multi-dimensional space. This is a single variable x that you are looking at. We look at the Jacobian, which is the gradient, and we look at the Hessian matrix, which is the your higher order the derivatives. Okay, partial derivatives. And the understanding comes from the simple Taylor series expansion of a function about a point. And if we expand the function at a given point and see how the higher order terms are contributing to that, from that we can understand why we are putting that specific higher order constraints. So if the second derivative is all positive, in the sense the function is increasing all around the given point. That means if you perturb a given point, wherever it goes, that it is going to come down. If you see, for a small disturbance, the first order term will not be contributing because the gradient is has vanished. But the second order, the term in the Taylor series expansion will contribute to the function increase. If it is contributing to function increase all through around a given point, then we say that, we are in the minima. So this is how, we write down our sufficiency condition for the optima. Okay. So I hope, the visualization and the explanation necessary and sufficiency condition. And in a constrained optimization problem, we call these as the KKT condition or Kurush-Kuntaker conditions. Okay. More details, you can always go and pick up an optimization book and read it. Okay. And that was the blackboard. And if I had the luxury of working with a paper, so we can just do this very simple optimization problem formulation and trying to visualize what we are trying to do. So let's say here what you are seeing is a very toy problem of an optimization wherein I am giving you a sheet. Let's say it could be an A4 sheet or any other sheet, and say I would like to create an open box which has the maximum volume. So if I just post that problem in such a fashion, then it is basically an unconstrained problem, and I am just interested in maximizing this volume. So you will see that the way I am preparing the box is I am doing a corner cut, and I am doing a cut with, say, certain dimension x. So the expression for this volume becomes like this, where these are the dimensions of the paper that I have taken, and finding the maxima of this is as good as finding the minima of this, right? So this is one property that we keep using it. Finding the maximization of a function v is same as doing the minimization of the function minus v. That is how we transpose a problem, because optimization toolbox are always written in a particular fashion. So let's say I have my toolbox which always does a minimization problem. So then I have to pose my problem. Even if I have a maximization problem, I will have to pose it as a minimization problem so that I can feed it into the solver. Okay. So the standard formulation will be like minimize and subject to constraints, and the constraints are also written in a specific way, like less than or equal to. So always we try to write the problem in such a fashion, and it is always possible to write any optimization problem in what we call as a standard terminology, so that can be then ported to any toolbox, let's say MATLAB in this case, or any other toolbox. Okay. And the unconstrained problem is like, I can always do this as a root finding, like, derivative of this v with respect to x, I can equate it to 0, or numerically, I can also do it like a search. I can start with some x and I start, iterating upon the numerical methods we will see a little later. Okay. And I can find the solution. And the same problem, I can also pose it as a constraint problem, saying that, I want to, maximize the volume for a given area of the sheet, because the area of the sheet is the cost. If you would see in this problem, the performance was the volume parameter, like certain quantity of liquid. So you can think of this as a big gas container optimization problem, where I'm interested in creating some, and my maintenance cost, my fabrication cost, everything will depend upon the surface area, and thereby I would like minimum, or at least if I can solve it as a multi-objective problem, I can solve it as minimize the surface area and maximize the volume, or I pose this as maximize the volume and subject to the constraint that the surface is less than certain allowable area. So that is how we pose a multi-objective engineering optimization problem into a single objective problem with some set of constraints. Okay, this is just a toy problem just to illustrate how we look at and formulate the optimization problem. So let's see a more practical engineering problem. So here I have just taken one problem which I have worked earlier. So this is a Taylor welded blank formability analysis, and what you see here is a simple, spherical cup shape forming. Okay, and in order to optimize the material, we may not need high strength material or high corrosive resistance material everywhere. So we might want to have sheets with those specific material properties at the location that is needed. And instead of post welding them after forming, we can weld them and form it, because then I can have a better control on, let's say, the end products, say spring back effect or built-in stresses. So these Taylor welded blanks are tailored to the requirement at those specific places. And since these are welded and these are heterogeneous, the formability becomes a very critical issue. And this problem that we looked at a few years back was looking at this Taylor welded blank formability, and the standard, the square cup cross section forming is what is illustrated here. You have several variables here, like, the punch force, the blank holding force that you see here. I hope you are able to see my mouse. So this is the blank holding force and this is the punch force, right? So these may become like constraints because I have a machine with a certain capacity. So I have the capacity of, creating only so much punch force, or this much, blank holding force only can be applied on the given system. And what I am varying, I may vary the thickness of the sheet on the both sides. I may vary the material properties on the both sides. I may have these weld orientation. With respect to the die, the punching setup, my location and orientation can be different. Those are all described here. So if it is a square cup forming, you can see that, those location and orientation could be different. So these are all the variables that I have, and more explicitly written here. So yeah, I have all these variables, the strength of the weld material, the weld zone properties, right? The property of the blanks, right? They are all changing. The geometry of the weld and the orientation location is changing. So this is my design exploration space, in the sense I can vary all of this to get, let's say, good, forming characteristics. And I have constraints like, how much punch force I can put in, or how much blank holding force I can put in. And these becomes my constraint. I can have several objectives, like here, I may want to limit my maximum punch force, or, I might want to maximize the, or, I may want to minimize the maximum well line movement, because as I form, the well line will be moving, or I may want to have a minimum draw-in profile. When the sheet draws into the cup, you can see that this will become like an arc, and this will limit the depth of, draw as well. So I might want to minimize this. So any of these things, so all of these things could be objectives if I would like to pose it as a multi-objective problem, or I can choose one of these as the primary objective, and the rest, I can put as constraint. I can say, maximize the depth of draw subject to the constraint that the punch force has to be less than this value, the well line movement has to be less than this value, the drawing profile has to be less than this value, and so forth. That is how the problem formulation happens. Okay. This is all the simulation. So how I actually do this f of x that we saw as very simple here, right? So this is x and this is f of x. So how do I evaluate what is the function? So either I have to do an experiment. That means I have to create these combinations of, these design parameters, and I have to do a forming exercise to find how much, it can be formed, or I can use, say, some numerical tool like a deep drawing, simulation, which we used in this case, and get the simulation. Unfortunately, because it's a Mac system, I think these videos are not running. But anyway, so you will get these membrane stresses and the strains, and by looking at this failure limit diagram, you can know that where this when the membrane becomes thin, or where the failure happens. And with these simulations, I can get all these performance parameters. And so either I can do these simulations at some sampled design location, and that is where DOE comes into picture. And with those values, I can create the surrogates, and I can do the optimization. Or I can use a high fidelity optimization framework where from one simulation to the other, I can actually use my numerical simulation tool itself to give me all the, the derivative. Let's say, if I am using say a conventional method, and I am interested in the derivative at a given point, then I can use either the central difference or the, these methods to find what is the derivative by repeatedly doing the function evaluation. So it all depends upon how costly is my simulation, how much time, what is my computational resource that I have. So this is where I said, defining this framework, deciding how I formulate the problem is very critical in all knowing what kind of quality of solution that we can obtain. Okay. So this is the verbal way of looking at this problem, and you can post the optimization problem. Okay. So now I will move on to the numerical technique itself. In between, we will come back to the concepts of optima wherever it is necessary. And as I said, we have the general optimization is a multi-objective problem, but we simplify this as a single objective and a constraint problem. And before going to understand that, we can look at the unconstrained optimization problem. Okay. So where, this is a nice mathematical function, and you see the function surface here, and these are the contours of these function. Okay. And as you can see, this is a little difficult problem from the perspective of numerical optimization, because wherever you will start, you will see that immediately you can descend down. Like if you think of a water droplet forming in this landscape, the water droplet will immediately descend down to the valley, but the valley itself is descending. So that descent is a slow slope, and thereby it will move very slowly. When I say slowly, here we are looking at the computational cost. That means I have to do a lot of time steps. In the sense, I will have to do many iterations. My step lengths will become very small from a movement on this landscape, and I will be able to reach, let's say this is the solution, or this is the minimum point available in this landscape. And if I would like to achieve this, or I would like to go there, you can see that I have to move. Each of these is a dot, each of this is a step, and you can see that I take a lot of steps to reach this point. Whereas here you can see in one jump, or in two jumps, I can pretty much reach this. So you can see that in an engineering problem, you may have these kind of scenarios. So upfront, you may not know where the gradients are steeper, and thereby your method will quickly descend, and where the gradients are not so steeper, and thereby it will take more time for you to move in those regions. Okay, so these are the actual the computational complexity of the problem. Okay, though here the equation itself looks pretty nice, but computationally you can see that this is the complexity that is involved. Okay, so this is the picturization. I have just taken a two variable problem. You similarly visualize a multi variable multi-dimensional problem space. Okay, so whenever we move, as you can see here, you are moving actually across these contour lines. So these are all the contour lines. And basically that is the direction of your gradient. So if I'm using any method and if I'm doing a minimization, essentially I am looking at the direction in which there is a descent. In the sense the function value is decreasing. So at any given point, if I take the gradient of that function or the Jacobian in the case of the multivariable problem, that points to the direction in which the function value is maximally increasing. And thereby the opposite of that, which is also called as the steepest descent. And that's why, we have this Cauchy's steepest descent method. Okay. So the opposite of that direction is the steepest descent direction. But I can also choose any direction D whose dot product with this descent direction is positive, or in other words, D dot del F, let's say is the Jacobian. If D dot del F is negative, that means that direction D is a locally descent direction at any given point. I take any point X, okay, with the values X1 and X2. Here in this case, it is just a two variable problem, okay. So such a direction D which qualifies that, it is a descent direction, okay. So then I can actually use any of that direction. So there are several methods. We know Cauchy's steepest descent direction because it at every point it always tries to go in the direction of the steepest descent, that is minus del F. But there are also several other directions D which are also descent, but they may not be the steepest descent for that location. But still, we can go with those directions, because you will see that in certain problems, if we always pick up the steepest descent direction, we may be computationally, overburdening ourselves in terms of, reaching the optimal solution. So there are solution methods, techniques like conjugate gradient and several other methods are there, which will choose a direction D. D has to be descent, okay, but it need not be the steepest descent direction, okay. And how do we choose that D is the specifics of that method. Like conjugate gradient will have one particular method of choosing that direction, but always we choose a descent direction, okay, because we want to improve the function value. In the sense, if we are looking at a, we want to get, lower and lower function values, and thereby I have to always look for a descent direction, okay. So this is the concept, how I will solve an unconstrained optimization, wherein numerically I cannot explore, an infinite space. So typically in an unconstrained problem, what we do, we will put a variable bound. That means to the design space, we will put a hypercube. That means we will put a box and say that I am going to work within this box only. And that's why in an unconstrained optimization, apart from this objective function that we are looking at, we also put what we call as the variable limits, okay, the upper and lower limits for each of the variables that we are having, okay. So that gives us a hypercube, the design space within which we are going to explore or find the solution, okay. And whatever we are going to get, that solution is minima for that hypercube that we have chosen. So if you find that the solution goes and sticks to one of the variable boundaries, then you know that there is more space where you can further better your solution, and that could be treated as the next set of solution. That is how we start. So I have put one hypercube, I found a solution. I don't have further time to do further optimization, so I will create a product for that solution, but still knowing the fact that I can move this boundary and further get some better products or better solutions to the given problem that is there in my hand, okay. So that is how we incrementally improve the products or process that we have, okay. So to this visualization, let us now add a constraint. So here you see a simple mathematical equation, g of x less than or equal to 0. You can see that any constraint can be written in this form. That means some function which is less than or equal to 0 kind of form. And that is what I said, standard forms. Okay. And there are also equality constraints. And I would say, equality constraints are more difficult to handle from a mathematical perspective. So what can be done is, we know that, each equality constraint is equivalent to reducing one dimensional space, because I can use that equation to remove one variable from the problem. If it is possible for me to do that, I can do that. But in most engineering problems, we cannot do it. So how do we handle those kind of, equality constraints? So typically we will convert an equality constraint into an set of inequality constraints. So instead of putting a line, I would say I would choose a band. I would say, I would move plus or minus on both sides. And I would say that instead of looking at that constraint as an equality constraint, I would make it into a small band or a small region, and thereby converting that into set of inequality constraint. This is for us to handle the constraint but in a better way from a numerical perspective, because working, moving on a particular line or a surface is more difficult. You can think of in a multi-dimensional space, I give you a surface and say that numerically you have to always move on this surface only. From a given point, you have to point which will be lying on that surface. It is possible numerically. We have techniques like, gradient projection technique, wherein, you take the gradient, you have to move along that gradient, but you know that since the surface could be nonlinear, when you move tangentially, that means you're moving on the tangent plane of that surface. And you have to now do a projection. That means you have to now move from the tangent plane to the actual constraint surface. So that is why if you have a nonlinear constraint, a multi-dimensional space, you have a nonlinear constraint, moving on a constraint surface is computationally a more involved task. Okay. So typically I would like to avoid that and maybe, try to convert that into some set of, inequality constraints and so forth. So these are some tricks, that we have to employ so that problem becomes tractable and, we can solve it using the numerical methods. Okay. So coming back to this problem, you have this simple constraint. So you can visualize this constraint because this is just an equation of a circle, and I have just drawn the set of contours corresponding to that circle as well. So now the solution is that there is a feasible region defined by the constraint boundary. Instead of now having the complete design space, now I have a part of the design space defined by the set of constraint boundary, and I have to iterate and find the solution there. So now if I randomly start an initialization point, I may start anywhere. So typically I may start somewhere in an infeasible region because my solution has to lie within the circle, but I may start outside. So I can have now methods which will iterate in the infeasible region, finally try to converge to the solution. That is one way of, doing the problem or, finding the solution. The other way is that start with a feasible region. That means when I want to pick up a point, I always pick up a feasible solution. You know that the current design in any design exercise, the current design is a feasible design. I have fabricated it, but I am trying to improve upon and market that product in a better way. So my current product is a feasible product. So I can start from there and then start looking at the optimal solution. Or I have a process which is running in one particular, condition. So I know the process parameters, which is a feasible process parameter. Then I can look at for a more, optimal or a, optimal process condition. And I can put my problem formulation in such a way that each of the steps that I am moving is always within this feasible region. So that is why, methods like, only the methods which will constrain each step to only be restricted to the feasible region. And this is good in one sense because I'm always in the feasible region and I have the luxury of stopping optimization at any point because my solution will be suboptimal. I know that, but at least it is feasible. I can go ahead. Okay. Initially I had the luxury of 1 year to do the product development. Suddenly my top management says that no, it is curtailed to 8 months or 6 months. So then I cannot, say that no, my my whole optimization is still in the infeasible region, right? But rather it could have been better if I had started in the feasible region and confined each of my iteration within this feasible region. So when coming to numerical methods, you will see that there are several ways of handling this. We handle this with penalty. Okay, these constraints, we will formulate it as a penalty function. And there are ways of handling like, interior penalty method, exterior penalty method, and all you will be able to read in the text. The context that I would like to bring in is that how would you like to solve it? Would you like to solve it in such a fashion that I choose a point somewhere and I just keep iterating the whole space and try to come back to the feasible region, or I would like to start in a feasible region, restrict my whole search within the feasible region, and I reach the feasible solution point. Okay, so these are strategies of how you will handle your optimization, and accordingly you can choose the method that is available. Okay. Any questions? I hope the pace at which I am going is fine, right? Gupta.
Someone has asked regarding the textbook appropriate optimization of manufacturing process.
Sorry.
In the chat
Textbook.
box, somebody has asked actually.
Chat box. Okay.
Let me read the question. Please suggest some appropriate book according to you for optimization in manufacturing process, which gives more practical approach and examples.
Okay. For manufacturing process. Okay. I think maybe I will resort to this question later. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because right now probably I may not have any answer to him because
yes.
not that too many manufacturing problems that I have worked on, but yes, there may be some specific books that may be geared towards manufacturing processes. Okay.
Sure. Yes. Okay.
I think a lot of books are available in terms of process optimization.
But for manufacturing,
chemical process and all, there are a lot of books. To manufacturing, yes, we have to. Maybe we may suggest. Okay.
Yes.
So how do I solve? So now let's go to the method per se. So any multi-variable optimization problem, we by doing what is called as a line search. That means I start from a point and I decide a direction. Like here, if you see, this is a starting point and this is the direction. How do I choose the direction? I already said, like, I could choose the direction D to be the descent direction. So once I choose a descent direction, then how far I go, where do I find the solution, or where do I stop searching along that direction is what we call it as a line search. And this is, I would say, the first steps in optimization. In the sense, if I think of optimization as an iterative numerical method, then this is lying at the first step. In the sense, this is what I would be doing repeatedly. I will be doing a line search in a multi-dimensional space. As you can see here, I'm doing one line search here. I'm doing another line search here. I'm doing another line search here. I'm doing another line search here, and so forth. So any multivariable optimization problem is broken down into a single variable optimization. In the sense, when I fix a direction in a multidimensional space, it becomes a single variable problem, because now all I have to do is how far I have to go along that given. Okay, if I choose X and the direction D, then the step length becomes my variable. And that is how we break a multivariable optimization problem into several sets of single variable optimization problem. And there are some very good algorithms to work with these line searches, or what we call a single variable optimization. If you take any optimization textbook, you will see that there are techniques mentioned against single variable optimization, and those could be used. Okay, if you look at the visualization of this is what I am trying to do. So once, my direction is fixed, then the problem becomes a single variable problem, and this is the step length. That is, x becomes now the step length. The length, the direction has been chosen, and the step length becomes now the variable. X is the step length, and I have to find where the function is minima along that direction. Okay, and when I do it in an numerical fashion, I can do it in several ways. I can do what is called as an exhaustive search. That means, I start, this is my current point A typically, and B could be either the variable limit, or this is like, putting a direction vector and seeing where that vector is, intercepting with a constraint boundary. So I will look at, which constraint boundaries, it is intersecting, and the length corresponding to the minimum one, that means the closest constraint boundary, will be the limit for that line search. That is this B. Okay, so this A and B are chosen for each of the line searches, where A is nothing but the current point itself, and B is your limit given by the constraint. And I can do several ways of doing it. I can do an exhaustive search. Okay, that is what is reflected here. So I start with some point, I start with some step length, and I keep moving. So at each of these points, I have to have the function value evaluated. Okay, so if I keep my delta x larger, then I may do the search faster, but I may miss the optima. But typically, when we do a line search, it is good to keep a little larger, del x. Otherwise, our computational cost will be high. Okay, and we may locate this minima. And there are several ways of refining it. So instead of choosing, just 1 minute. Pradeep, I am in a class. Are we meeting? You can meet with Professor Murugan. Okay, I'll meet with you later. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about the disturbance. Okay, so let's continue. So after doing this line search, we can do this in 2 steps. One is that I can fix the step length, that is this delta x, and I can explore it in an exhaustive fashion, or I can do this search with the larger delta x, and then I can do the refined search with what we call as region elimination technique. Okay, so if you come to MATLAB itself, you have several of these tools available. So so what I will do is later through Dr. DVK Gupta, I would also share you some MATLAB files, which you can explore, okay, at your leisure. As I said, I typically do this as a hands-on session, but considering the present situation, we will do it in this fashion. Okay, so you can choose this MATLAB file, which will be given to you. So this is a simple function that I have given, for which you can run this program and execute and find the solution. Okay, to visualize how the program is working. Okay. So this is called as the exhaustive search method. Okay, this is a program. I will anyway skip it. So you can see that you can code your starting and end point, the incremental step length. Okay, the function you can code. Okay, what is a function that you can use? Okay, and it will give you the lower bound and the upper bound of the reduced interval. So if you see here, visualize it. This is the original interval that you started with, AB, and the final interval of this method will be these 2 blue points. Okay, because that is what bounds the optima. We have not actually found the optima, but we have found the bound where the optima is lying. Okay, and that bound will depend upon the delta x, the step length that you are choosing, and the final interval length will be 2 delta x. Okay, so that is the interval length. So original interval AB is reduced to 2 delta x. Okay, when you come out of this, algorithm. Okay, and at that point you can either further refine that solution, or you can choose the next direction of search, because I know that I have fairly come to a very close solution, and you should keep the big picture in mind, that this is just a line search in a multidimensional search. So there is no point in exactly finding the correct solution for this line search. If I know a suboptimal, reasonably good solution, then I can look for the next search direction and I can improve my solution. Okay. So rather than, trying to minimize the function in that direction itself, the step, the next step would be to search, look for the alternate, search direction, because already the gradient has reduced fairly very much in that direction, and there is no point further trying to minimize it. Okay, maybe towards the end I can try to have further refinement technique, and in that case you can use what is called as these region elimination or refining techniques. So if you consider this A and B as the limits that you have obtained from here, these two blue points that you are seeing in this graph, okay, then I can further eliminate it. So here you see that I can use a better way of exploring this, rather than using the exhaustive search method. What I can do is use the principle of region elimination. What we do is we evaluate at 3 points, and based on the function value of these values, we decide in which region the minima will not be lying, and thereby eliminate that region. Okay, so you will see that in the first step this region will be eliminated. Unfortunately, this is actually an animation, because I'm not in the slideshow mode, you are not able to see that. Then in the second step, you will see that this region will be eliminated, and then finally this region will be eliminated, and so forth. Okay, and there are very good techniques like the golden section method or Fibonacci method, which are available for doing this region elimination. Okay, so one MATLAB file, this golden.m, will be available to you in the directory that will be shared later. You can try to execute that, and on the same problem, on the limits that you have originally obtained, you can further reduce the reduce that interval and get the solution. Okay, so this is just output of that. I just ran it so that I can show you. So you can see that your optima is obtained. Okay. So there are some problems also. I would intercept these slides. The PDF will be again shared with you, so you can work with this. You can go and recode the MATLAB program or change the function. So in this folder, if you see, you will see f.m, which is a MATLAB file wherein you can code your function. Okay. Yeah. I hope most of you are interested in doing the coding, and if you would like to do a practice, you can pick up all these files and work with them. Okay. Okay. So coming back to more realistic engineering problems where now we have constraints. So this picture is a nice picture. This is from this book by van der Plas. So this is like a man blinded, and he is asked to go and reach the top of the mountain, and now there are constraints, like there are some fences, and he is supposed to just walk up. So how do he reach that, peak? So this is the kind of problem, the optimization is actually doing, a constraint optimization problem is doing. So if you would have seen, if I would blindfold you, what will you do to reach the peak? What will you do? Anyone?
You can write in the chat box.
I blindfold you and this is the problem given to you. Okay, how do you reach the top?
Some of the participant is saying check the gradient.
How do you check it?
One student is writing walk close to the fence.
Close to the fence. Okay.
One of them has written take the support of the railing.
Railing is this. Okay. Basically the constraint surface, he means to say. Okay. But nevertheless, as someone pointed, first I need to know, whether I'm going up or down, because my target is to reach that flag or, the peak point on the mountain. So I need to know the gradient, right? That is the first step. So then only, I can go in that direction. And if a fence comes up, if I, go and hit a fence, then I either move along the fence or I change my direction, right? Opposite to that, right? That is how I have to do. So the finding the direction is like your the central difference method or anything. Like I can do that. Like I take my leg, I I keep tapping on all my directions and see which direction my foot is going down, and I know that is a descent direction. And in this case, since I have to find the maxima, I will go in the exactly opposite direction. And if I go and hit a fence, then I can have strategies like I will just move orthogonal, that is perpendicular to the fence, so that I don't come back again to the fence. That is one strategy. Again, maintaining that my function has to keep increasing. So that is how now we bring in this concept of feasible descent direction. So what do I now do? Now, instead of just having the Jacobian of the function, which gave me the direction in which I have to move, wherever the constraints become active, when I have moved and I have come closer to the constraint, then for all those active constraints, I take their Jacobian as well. That means their derivatives, and that gives me the direction, feasible direction. So the direction given by the Jacobian of a constraint is the maximally feasible direction. And the Jacobian of the landscape gives me the maximally ascent or descent direction, whichever way I am looking at, whether it is a maximization or a minimization problem. So now the problem can be formulated as take a direction D such that direction D is both descent or ascent, whichever may be the case. If I am looking at maximization, it should be an ascent direction as well as it should be a feasible direction. So I can pose the problem in such a fashion. So such kind of methods are called as feasible direction method, or at each point I find the best possible feasible direction. If no constraints are available, that is as good as the Cauchy's steepest descent method. But the moment some constraints will appear, then my direction D will be deflected based on the constraint, and that is the Jacobian of that constraint or the gradient of that constraint. Okay, so I can pose this problem again numerically. If you will say finding this direction D which is both descent as well as which is feasible can be posed as a linear programming problem. Okay, you have to visualize this. It can be posed as a linear programming problem, and you can find the direction D. Once you find the direction D, you have to just do any of the line searches as described earlier. Okay, move to the next point and then again find. If there are no active constraints, then I can move using a steepest descent. If constraints are active, again I will resort to finding the best feasible direction. Okay, I hope you are able to visualize this. So this is where we come to solving constraint problem, and So this is what I had been mentioning. So I start with the point. This is x naught, and d is the direction that I have chosen. So which is a descent direction in case of unconstrained optimization, and in case of constrained optimization, this d will be both feasible as well as descent. Okay, and the step length alpha is what I have to optimize. Okay, and that becomes my line search method. Okay. I think I will skip this. So I have described what is a descent direction. So there's an again an example problem I had put up for you to look at it. Okay. So this is the function, and you have to search for the minima in this. So here you will see that you will use several line searches to come to this point. Okay. So at each point you will pick up either the steepest descent depending upon the algorithm option that you are choosing. So you will see that here you can choose this option. Here if you see optim options is the command with which you can pick up the algorithm. You can choose the algorithm that you want to use. So quasi-Newton, or you want to use the steepest descent. Okay, you can choose the sequential, quadratic, SQP. You can choose the option here how you want to do that line search. Okay, and you can execute then this optimization problem. Okay. So this is just an illustration of how you will get the solution for this given problem. Okay, this is a function, and again this is this function. Okay, this has both the regions where the gradient is quite steep, and then there are regions where the gradients are not so steep. Okay, so you will be able to visualize how the algorithm is working. Each algorithm, when you choose the different algorithms, how from the same starting point how it moves. Okay, if you choose a conjugate gradient, how it moves. If you choose a steepest descent, how it moves, you can visualize. Okay. So you can see that this is how it iterates. Okay, you start from this point, and before it reaches this, this is along one direction, the number of iterations it takes. Okay, to reach that point. Okay. Okay, I will skip this. This is a steepest descent, again illustration for the steepest descent. Okay. I just mentioned that finding this feasible direction could be posed as a linear programming problem. Okay, so I thought we'll just have a quick recap of linear programming. I think as part of several courses we might have already understood that, but big picture visualization is that your functions are linear and your constraints are also linear. So you are looking at a problem space something like this, where my function is linear. So that means you have these function contours are all straight lines, and your constraints are also linear. So in such a problem, you will see that the solution is always on the vertex. It may be along the constraint as well, but that we need not worry, because any solution along a constraint, let's say, if a constraint is parallel to this objective function, then it may so happen that any point along that constraint boundary is an optimal solution. But all of them are having the same value, and that means all of them are, global. So in a linear programming problem, that's why we say that any solution that we find is both local as well as global. In the sense, we just have one solution which is both local as well as global. Okay, and how do we find that? We have this simplex method. Essentially, visualizing that method is moving from one vertex point to the other point. Knowing the fact that the solution of a linear programming problem lies in the vertex, the simplex method just algorithmically makes it possible for you to move from one vertex to the other vertex. So in simplex, you will see that, based on the number of variables that you have and the number of, the constraints that you are having. So always we pose it in terms of the equality constraint. Any inequality constraint is always posed in terms of equality constraint by adding additional slack variables. I think that, the transformation you will be knowing, okay? Any type of constraint can be rewritten, any type of problem can be rewritten in this standard form. And once we have it in the standard form, we can use this toolbox for solving this problem. Okay. The idea of the simplex method is to find a vertex point. So finding a vertex is finding a basic solution. Okay, feasible solution. So in order to do that, we have this basic and non-basic variables. I'll not go into the details of the method. Essentially, dividing the variable set into basic and non-basic variable is essentially finding a vertex in the in that boundary. Okay, and once I had found the vertex, the next step of the simplex method tries to see in which direction to move. So in this case, it is a 2D. So I have two adjacent nodes, which is this D and say in this case B. So I have to find which is a good candidate, whether I should go to B or whether I should go to D. And accordingly, I will swap. I will move some non-basic variable to the basic and so forth. And thereby the value of these, the variables will change. Okay. And in this fashion, the method moves till it finds the optimal solution. Okay. So again, I had given one problem as an illustration, and there is a code also given in the directory that will be shared. Okay. So this is a standard form of posing the problem. So you have to write the set of inequality constraints, set of equality constraints that you have, and the variable limits, and the function that you are trying to minimize. Okay. So this is the way you call this Lin programming, and these are the ways you represent that as a matrix form. Okay, A, E, Q are all the coefficients of the equality and inequality constraints, whatever is there, and B and BEQ are the the terms, constant terms that you have. Okay, so this is how you call this program, linear programming. This is the illustration of how the program will run for a particular case. Okay, and you can also try out on another problem. Okay. So now, having a visualization and understanding of how do we do the unconstrained optimization, let us look at how we solve a constrained optimization problem, or how do we get the solution. So in a constrained optimization problem, the necessary condition is what is the Kurush-Kuntakar's condition, or what is called as the KKT condition. How that is obtained is that we form the Lagrangian, wherein we take the objective function and the constraints, and we write the Lagrangian in terms of the objective function plus the constraint functions multiplied by the Lagrangian multipliers. Okay, that is how we formulate the Lagrangian, and then the stationary condition of the Lagrangian is taken, and that gives us the necessary condition in case of a constraint problem. And if you look at the KKT condition, that is the stationary point of the Lagrangian, that will essentially give you conditions that will ensure that the constraints are satisfied, and also from the objective, it is with respect to the objective function and the constraints, the point is a stationary point. I'll just show you the visualization of that, just a couple of slides, down the line. Just take this example, a simple column, minimization problem. So we are interested in minimizing the weight of this column. So there is a load, and so these are the dimensions. So let's say this is a annular column, in the sense it has both ID and OD, and hollow column. And in the column design, we know that we have to look for the buckling condition, as well as we have to look at the stress. So we write those equation. I'll not go into the details of this. Any standard mechanics book will give you. Okay, and if you pose this problem and say that I would like to minimize the weight, in this case I can minimize the weight by appropriately choosing the diameters, the ID and OD of this column. Okay, so if you look at this problem, you have the objective function which is minimizing the weight. So you have R and T. So instead of having the inner diameter and outer diameter, I have this radius R, which is the mean radius, and T, which is the thickness. Okay, so these are the two variables. So if you visualize this problem in this two variable space, you will see that the weight is minimum when obviously T is 0 and R is 0. That means I don't build the column at all. So that is a kind of trivial solution we will get if we don't pose the problem properly. Okay, so but then what is the constraint? So we have a constraint based on stress, we have a constraint based on the buckling condition. So those are these lines, and that will prevent you from reaching this 0 point. That means don't build the column, because I have to build it so that I have to take up that load. But where do I stop? So from say some point, if I start moving, I am moving in this direction. So these are the cost contours that you are seeing. Okay, these are all the equal weight columns. These lines that you are seeing, they are all equal weight columns. Okay, and these are all the constraints. So where will the solution lie? What is the possibility? So the possibility is that it will lie in one of these constraint boundary. I don't know whether it will be this point A. It depends upon the gradient of this cost function and the gradient of this constraint function. Okay, depending upon that, the solution will lie either in this portion, that is AB, or in this portion, that is A and below this. Okay, that is on G2 or on G1. The solution can lie depending upon what is the gradient of this cost function f. Okay, and to visualize this better, I had just chosen a arbitrary diagram to show you how it will look like. So the KKT condition essentially gives you when the the stationary point will be reached. So if you see that these are all the cost contours, these ellipses that you are seeing. So at any given point, you will see that this dotted line that you are seeing is minus del f. That is the direction in which the function is a descent direction. That means I would like to move in this direction so that I can reduce my function value. But this is my feasible region, bounded by several set of constraints, GIs, okay? G1, G2, G3 and so forth. Okay, so this region is GI of x less than or equal to 0, and outside this is GI of x greater than 0. And there are several such constraints which are bounding this feasible region. So at a given solution, what happens is, if you look at this as a mass subjected to some set of forces, if this has to be a stationary point, that means the ball should not move, then I should have the condition that this minus del F, which is the force which is acting on this ball, needs to be balanced by another force which is coming from this constraint. Okay, so this del G is the gradient of this constraint. And when will the ball stop is that when both these vectors that you are seeing, del G and del f or minus del f, they are in the same direction. That means, what is the meaning of this condition? It says that this is the direction in which the function is maximally descending. That means I would like to move in this direction if I would like to reduce my function value, but that direction is also the direction in which maximally I will be violating the constraint. So that means I don't have any further scope of movement. If I was in some point, then I will see that the resultant of these two directions, that these two directions are not, along the same direction. So that means, I have a direction D in which if I move, that direction D will have a component along minus del F, and as well as it will have a component along the direction minus del G. That means the feasible region. Okay. Del G is the infeasible region. Why I am saying del G is infeasible? Because I have written G of X is less than or equal to 0. So minus del G is the direction in which the region is feasible. Okay. And when I reach this point, then the ratio of these forces is basically the Lagrangian multiplier. Okay. And if I have multiple constraints, then I will have the Lagrangian multiplier corresponding to each of these constraint values. So you can look at this as a resolution of these vectors, and the Lagrangian multiplier gives the scaling for each of these vectors, so that vector sum is 0. Okay. And this is what you have to look at here. So whichever point where that KKT condition is satisfied, that will become the solution. Okay. So again, you have in MATLAB fmin_con, which is a very standard function which is used, and this is the standard formulation. You have the inequality constraint, equality constraints, and the function f of x, which needs to be minimized. So any problem, you can formulate it in this fashion. You have greater than or equal to, you can modify it to less than or equal to. You have a maximizing function, you can make it into minimizing, and so forth. Okay. TVK?
Yes.
Hello. So what is the schedule? Let me.
You have almost 3 minutes left. Actually, 1.5 hours is the session.
Yeah. I know that.
You can wind up,
okay.
and we can have some question answer session.
Yeah. So what I will do, just give me 5 minutes. Okay.
Yes,
I will maybe go a little faster. Okay.
Sure.
Or I will just talk about the GA, and then probably we can wind up and take up some questions. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So again, you can pick up some example problems from the directory that will be shared with you. Okay, we will skip things. So this is what I was mentioning. You can choose this penalty function method, exterior penalty, interior penalty methods. Okay. Okay. So all what we saw till now is traditional way of looking at optimization from the using the gradient information, and we have these evolutionary methods which work in a different fashion, in the sense they use concepts that are there or that are embodied in the way nature functions. Okay, there are several algorithms, particle swarm optimization, bird flocking algorithm, anthill optimization, or annealing, simulated annealing. All of these are trying to look at some physical phenomena in nature, and or how organisms find an optimal way of doing things, and kind of mimic it into the algorithm. So most of these methods are all population based techniques, where we take a lot of solutions and drive these solutions towards an optimum. And this kind of a framework is good from several perspectives. One is that since I am working with the population of solution, which I can randomly pick up from the design domain, there is a possibility that, I may not be stuck in a local optima, but rather, I might be able to find the global optima. It is looking like a watershed problem. In a rain, if rain starts, you will see small puddles will start forming. Each of these puddle is a small, that is the local optima. So since water droplets are falling everywhere, those will be collected in the respective basins, and they will form the puddle. But if I have just one drop, and it will, wherever it falls in that local basin only, it can go descend down and it can sit in that basin. So visualizing this in this fashion, most of these population based methods essentially explore the complete design space and gradually move towards the best basin that is available. And there are some small tricks or tweaking that you can do, so that instead of making sure that every point goes and falls into one single basin, you can also ensure that all the basins are filled and you can pick up the all local optima. That is called as multimodal optimization. You can do that. And you can also do multi-objective optimization, wherein by again doing a small tweaking, you can pose a multi-objective problem as a multimodal problem, because in the objective space, it will become like, non-dominated solution. And that is where this NSGA, a famous toolbox, right, from for genetic algorithm labs, is a very famous tool that is being used. Okay, that is nothing but a small tweaking, wherein this multimodal optimization, we take it to the criterion space, that is the objective space, and we solve a multi-objective problem. Okay, and since we do not have much time, I will skip through the details of these methods. And GS work with the natural, the genetics, and the basics is from what we understand from the Darwin's theory, and how a particular species becomes a dominant species based on its genetic characteristics. So we try to mimic it. So initial GIS were all binary GIS, trying to map these variables into a binary form, and thereby that will look more like a chromosome, and you can do this genetic swapping and all. Now real coded GI is also there, which will also do the same thing without having to binarize the numbers. Okay, and given a more complicated problem, like here you can see there are a lot of local minima, lot of basins are there, and you can see that by using GA you can get either one of them, that is the deepest basin that is available, or you can also tweak it such that you can get all the solution, that is all the modes. Okay, so that is called as preserving the species, and you can actually get all these local minima as well. Okay, so these are more details into how to use the toolboxes. And as I said, I will share my PPT with the organizer, and also the program files. Okay, so now we can have some questions. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Shravan. Thank you for a very informative session. Now we can have some questions. If people can, let me unmute everyone. So now you can ask, free to ask questions. Actually. Either you can write in the chat box, or you can take it. You can unmute yourself and you can do it. Yeah, there is some chat box. Somebody is asking, can you suggest optimization textbook for design?
Yeah, there are several books. Like you have this, the basic optimization book is your SS Rao's book. If you want to have the concepts, then that book is very good. But if you look at more from a design optimization perspective, this J.S. Arora's book is good. J.S. Arora, no, Optimum Design.
Optimum
And
design.
there is also a book by Kalyanmay Deb, which also gives you a lot of programs how to implement it in Fortran or C. And a book again by Kalyanmay Deb on multi-objective optimization.
Multi-objective optimization. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Everyone is thanking on you only, but there are no questions till now. So if you don't have any questions, then we can end this session at this point. Okay. Somebody has written. How trees can be taken in with MATLAB?
See, actually, see, trees, as you know, is more used in the concept the concept evolution stage of a design, and you have several inventive principles, some 40 of them, and in whether a particular inventive step or an inventive procedure is applicable for your problem or not cannot be converted into some kind of a mathematical form. So that is why several of these conceptual tools that we use for our design, there probably you have to use techniques like your concept scoring and matrix methods. Okay. May not be that all of these methods may not be directly applicable. Maybe some some techniques like linear programming can help, but I don't think any of these numerical techniques that we are talking about can help you in that stage. Okay, because there we are looking at let's say all these, because you have to convert how good a concept is applicable to your area into some number. Only when you have it when you can convert these qualitative information into some quantitative information, you can come to optimization. So if yes, if you can convert that into the numbers, that means if you can give those let's say how good a particular inventive step or a particular design principle can be used into for the current problem. So let's say you have all the 30 inventive steps or 40 inventive steps are there. You have to see, or you have to rank them, which one is most applicable to your case. And if you can do that ranking, yes, you can do the optimization. I don't know whether I have answered it the way you want, or if you have any specific question, yes, you can ask.
I hope it is clear, Dr. Selva Kumar. Okay, he is done. Any other queries?
By the way, I am not a TRIZ expert. Okay, there are many TRIZ experts. Okay.
Right.
But yes, we have used it because we have done a lot of this product design, and we have used several of these TRIS concepts for doing it, but I am not a qualified TRIS expert. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I think there are no more questions, it seems. Okay. Thank you, Dr. G. Sarwan Kumar, and thank you once again, actually, for this wonderful session. And I will be sharing your email also to all the participants. If they have any specific queries, they will be mailing to you.
Sure.
And Dr. G. Sarwan Kumar will be sharing some of the study
So what
material.
I will do is post this session, like I'll share you one file folder. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Well, I will share with all the participants actually, so they can work on the because there are some of the
please
examples.
always mail me. Okay. I do not entertain phone numbers and all. Please email me for any questions. Professor TVK will be sharing you my email ID, and you can always write to me on that. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Shravan. Huh? Shukla sir
Yeah.
is there?
Thank you.
Sir.
He's there, I
Shukla
think.
sir. Yeah, he's there, I think. Okay. Anyway, we'll end this session and hope we'll have more amount of conversations in the coming workshops actually. Okay then. Thank you. I'll stop here. I'll stop the recording also.
Yeah.
Okay.